Hello and welcome to The Thrifty Author. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and we're continuing our series moving through the book, Launching Your Book Without Losing Your Mind. And today we're on chapter 6, which is talking about the marketing plan for your book. Now, maybe you haven't thought about your book from a marketing plan perspective, particularly if it's a fiction book and not a how-to or a nonfiction book. But there's some real value to thinking about what's the plan for getting word out about your book into the world, because your real threat as an author doesn't come from other authors. There's plenty of time for people to read lots of books. The real threat comes from obscurity, from people not even knowing that your book is available, for people not even knowing that the kind of book that they love, which you've just written, is out in the world. And so that's what we're really trying to overcome here, because just putting a book out, whether it's on Amazon or whether you are coming through a traditional publisher and have bookstore distribution, just dropping a book into the world, there's too much going on and people won't notice. It has to have some sort of marketing plan behind it. And most publishers are not really going to spend an awful lot of time and effort customizing a plan. If they do anything for you, if you have a traditional publisher, it'll be some pretty cookie cutter stuff, like maybe getting you some, getting your arc out to some review sites or reviewers and talking about you on their blog and doing some tweets about you and maybe running some Facebook ads. But they're really not going to do much more on an average book launch. And so this is where it falls to you to really look at, how are you going to let the world know that your book is out there for them to read? And that's where a marketing plan comes in. So let's talk about some of the basics for a marketing plan. Now, this does work differently if you're writing a nonfiction book. But for a fiction book, you still have to think about who your target market is, because all readers don't read all books. So what genre does your book fall into? And if you don't know that, you really need to figure it out, because that's going to be a huge piece of your marketing. Genre exists to help readers find the kind of books they want to read. And that's why there are tropes for covers. That's why certain tropes fall into certain genres. That's why when you look at a book, a well-designed cover will tell you exactly what genre it is. Is this epic fantasy? Is this science fiction or space opera? Is this urban fantasy? Is this romance? We do judge books by their cover, even when we're buying online. So think about, first of all, what genre your book is, and then make sure you understand the demographics of that genre. Does that mean that there aren't outliers, that there aren't some older people who read books that are targeted to YA, or some younger readers who read books that are cozy mystery? No. But in general, you want to go for that hump on a bell curve where you've got the biggest group of people for the buck. It's easier to target them. And then you can bring the outliers in after you've reached that large group. So this is where you need to understand what the demographics are for your genre. And that's in terms of age, gender, income, interests, what other books are trending and popular, and take a look at what the authors and publishers of those books are doing. Because if they're popular, if they're selling well, then they're doing something right. And so this can be from analyzing how they write their book blurb, to analyzing what keywords and genres they have the book listed under. That makes a big difference in discoverability. If you get to pick 3 different categories on Amazon when you put your book up, and if you're self-pubbing, you have to do this yourself. You want to pick those categories carefully for a couple of reasons. One is, if you go too broad, it may be accurate, but you'll get lost in a sea of other titles. If you have a combination of broad and narrow, it gives your book a chance to stand out in a niche category and maybe even place very well top 10, top 20, top 100 in that niche, which makes it very discoverable to people who go looking for that niche. So look at those keywords, look at those categories, and see what the books that are doing well that are similar to yours are using, and then refine that so that it really gives an accurate picture of what your book is about for the readers that are looking exactly at what your book is about. Take a close look at the blurbs that are written for books that have come out recently in your genre, in your niche, and that are doing well. Because writing a blurb is an art that grows better with practice. And it has changed over time from what might have worked or was popular 5 years ago, 10 years ago, to what is working now. So you want to do your comparison here when you're learning how to write a blurb, if this falls to you, to the books that have come out in the last couple of years that are doing very well, that are similar to yours. Take a look at how they use a headline. Take a look at whether or not they list tropes and trigger warnings. Take a look at how long they are and what they choose to highlight about the book. And then sit down and do your best to write something similar that accurately describes your book. Now, it is possible to hire people to write blurbs for you. That only works if they're good at writing blurbs and if they have done this successfully. Otherwise, you're just hiring a writer and you're a writer. So you can learn this technique. You can have people teach you this technique. And there are services out there where you can submit your blurb and have somebody go over it and make suggestions on how to make it stronger for your category. But blurbs are something you really need to spend some time on, because especially now that people are largely buying online, they don't really have the chance, like we did in physical bookstores, to pick a book off the shelf, turn to a random page, read a chapter. Yeah, they can get the inside the book maybe off of Amazon, but that doesn't really give very much to go on. The blurb is really going to carry you. So make sure you understand what the successful books in your genre are doing for their blurbs and try to follow that template as well as you can. Now, you also want to look at who are you going to talk to get the word out about your book. And we've mentioned before, compiling a list of the bloggers, the online reviewers, in a world where we can go out and be at physical bookstores, maybe the local bookstores. Sometimes local bookstores, or depending on your subject matter, local museums will feature local authors, sometimes also your library. Be careful with library events, because people who go to libraries don't expect usually to buy books. They want to borrow books. So you can go and spend a lovely evening with people who only ever borrow from the library or only ever read free books. That is not going to help you sell more books unless they are also passionate advocates about telling all their book buying friends about this cool new book they found. So that's just a caveat. Libraries are wonderful, wonderful places. Not always the best place for an author if you're looking to actually sell books, or if you don't have a book that is being that is available at the library. So you're really looking nowadays primarily at online reviewers and bloggers, and you want to look at this early because they're busy and you can't send them an arc of your book a week before it comes out and expect them to have a review during your launch week. This also plays into how far in advance you have your book completed to have an advanced review copy, otherwise known as an ARC, available before your publication date, and whether or not you have pre-order. If you have your book up on pre-order and you have an advanced review copy at least several weeks before your launch date, then it's possible that people who sign up to read ARCs of your book could have it read and can have their review ready for when the book goes live. Otherwise, you're really looking at having people hopefully read the ARCs as soon as possible after your launch date. And of course, the closer you can get reviews posted to your launch date, the better it is for your rollout, because having a bunch of reviews when a book goes live, because people have had time to read it and get their reviews written, that's gold. You know, that immediately tells people, hey, here's a book to look at. And So that's kind of what you want to shoot for. Doesn't always work, can't always do that for every book. But if you have that ability to get the ARCs out into the world before your launch date and have ARC readers set up and ready for that, that's a real benefit if you can pull it off. Now, you also want to think about, we used to call this a SWOT analysis back in my business days: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is where you need to be candid in your own abilities. What are your strengths? Are you really good at writing things like blurbs and really good at writing guest blog posts? Great. Then that is something you can pitch. You're going to create a strong blurb, and you can tell book bloggers that you can do a guest post, and you're comfortable with that. Now, what are your weaknesses? Well, not everybody who writes books is real comfortable on camera. So how comfortable are you being on a Zoom call, being on a Facebook Live interview, making an appearance online, reading your book? This is more and more part of our reality, and it really lets you be location independent, because if you're on the internet, readers can find you from anywhere. Not everybody is real comfortable with their skills in front of a camera. That's something you can learn if you're willing to do it. But be candid with yourself and say, okay, I don't have real high comfort level on this. Maybe I need to practice, or maybe I need to get some coaching, or maybe I need to see what other people are doing and just do enough of it to get over the gollywobbles. That's something you need to think about for yourself, and the answer is going to be different for each person. But think about what your weaknesses are. Maybe a weakness, quote unquote, is that you're working a day job and you barely have time to write the book, let alone do a whole lot of marketing. So you're going to have to be very, very strategic and careful with your time. That's cool. You need to know that so that you can prioritize. So this is where you just need to sit down with a piece of paper and do some thinking so that you can plan the best marketing strategy given the reality of what you're working with. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. Who do you know who maybe runs a blog, maybe runs a bookstore, maybe does a podcast? Think about all the opportunities that you have found out there, not just in the people you know or the friends of friends, but what have you identified as you've been looking at these online resources? And where do you think you fit best? Maybe there's an online event coming up, like an online convention or an online book event that you can still get into. That could be cool. Take a look at what these opportunities are that might be time dependent, but would be around the time of your book launch, so that you can plan and make sure that you're available, that you have set the time aside for it, or have the chance to write something special if it's, for example, a guest blog, or if you need to learn to use a new piece of software for a video call. Make sure that you understand what you need to be able to do to seize the opportunity, because sometimes it's not quite as easy as just sitting down at your computer and typing something out. And then there's threats. Threats to me are more of things competing for your time. If you, for example, know that you're coming into a busy season at work, or that your work can become randomly busy, then a potential threat is that one of those random times happens at the worst possible time for your book launch. If you know that you have family responsibilities, I kind of guarantee that if you have small children, somebody's going to get sick right when you need to be focusing on your book launch. That just goes with the territory. So think in advance, if this happens, how will I handle it? If somebody gets sick and I'm supposed to be taking care of them the night I've also committed to be on a Zoom interview for a blogger, what are my options besides canceling? Can I get somebody to come in and sit? How can I handle this? And maybe you can't, but if you've thought about it, it won't throw you as badly as if predictably random chaos happens. A lot of things you can say are reasonably likely to happen as a quote unquote threat. So think about a way around them. And that way you'll be able to deal with whatever comes your way with a lot more success than if it just kind of sneaks up behind you and hits you on the head. And then do a competitive analysis. And I really don't believe authors compete with each other. My readers read 100 to 200 books a year. I don't write 100 to 200 books a year. Even if they read my entire backlist a couple of times, they'd still have room to read an awful lot of other authors. And I think that's true for most people. So I don't see other authors as a threat, but or as competition. What I mean by competition here are similar books. And this goes back to look at what similar books are using for Amazon categories and keywords and how they're writing their blurbs. Look at where those books are showing up on blogs and podcasts and online conventions. If somebody is, if somebody is doing what you want to do and has a book similar to yours, then backtrack their steps and see what seems to be working for them, and then figure out how to replicate it. That's a very logical way to create a strategy for your book that is reasonably field tested, because you can see whether or not it appears to be working well for somebody else. So that arms you with some ideas about how to put a book marketing strategy together for your book. And next, we'll be digging into some of the things to do month by month leading up to your rollout. So good luck, take care, keep writing, and I'll see you online.